Okay, part two. So, the evidence for the initiated tradition of the tarot. 1. Eliphas Levi and the tarot. Although the origins of the tarot are perfectly obscure, there's a very interesting piece of quite modern history well within the memory of living man, which is extremely significant, and will be found as the thesis develops to sustain it in a very remarkable way. In the middle of the 19th century, there arose a very great Kabbalist and scholar who still annoys dull people by his habit of diverting himself at their expense by making fools of them posthumously. His name was Alphonse Louis Constant, and he was an abbé of the Roman Church. For his nom de guerre, he translated his name into Hebrew, Eliphas Levi Zahed, and he is very generally known as Eliphas Levi. Eliphas Levi was a philosopher and an artist, besides being a supreme literary stylist and a practical joker of the variety called Prince sans rire, and being an artist and profound symbolist, he was immensely attracted by the tarot. While in England, he proposed to Kenneth Mackenzie, a famous occult scholar and high-grade Freemason, to reconstitute and issue a scientifically designed pack. In his works are new presentations by him of the trumps called Tile Chariot and the Devil. Maybe the Chariot is what they meant to say there. He seems to have understood that the tarot was actually a pictorial form of the Kabbalistic tree of life, which is the basis of the whole Kabbalah, so much so that he composed his works on this basis. He wished to write a complete treatise on magic. He divided his subject into two parts, theory and practice, which he called dogma and ritual. Each part has 22 chapters, one for each of the 22 trumps, and each chapter deals with the subject represented by the picture displayed by the trump. So that's a standard format for many books about tarot. They present, an image of the card, and they have a chapter devoted to the card, talking about all its attributions, associations, symbology, and meanings, etc. The importance of the accuracy of the correspondence will appear in due course. Here we come to a slight complication. The chapters correspond, but they correspond wrongly, and this is only to be explained by the fact that Levi felt himself bound by his original oath of secrecy to the order of initiates, which had given him the secrets of the tarot. Two, the tarot in cipher manuscripts. At the time of the French Renaissance of the 1850s, a similar movement took place in England. Its interest centered in ancient religions and their traditions of initiation and thaumaturgy. Learned societies, some secret or semi-secret, were founded or revived. Among the members of one such group, the Quator Coronati Lodge of Freemasonry, were three men. One, Dr. Wynne Westcott, a London coroner, a Dr. Woodford, and a Dr. Woodman. There is a little dispute as to which of these men went to the Farringdon Road, or whether it was the Farringdon Road to which they went, but there is no doubt whatever that one of them bought an old book, either from an obscure bookseller or off a barrow, or found it in a library. This happened about 1884 or 1885. There's no dispute that in this book there were some loose papers, that these papers turned out to be written in cipher, that these cipher manuscripts contained the material for the foundation of a secret society purporting to confer initiation by means of ritual, and that among these manuscripts was an attribution of the trumps of the tarot to the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. When this matter is examined, it becomes quite clear that Levi's wrong attribution of the letters was deliberate, that he knew the right attribution and considered it his duty to conceal it. It made much trouble for him to camouflage his chapters. Excuse me. So basically saying that Eliphas Levi in his book on tarot made some quote-unquote mistakes in his attributions of, I guess, the numbers or the order of the cards, but Crowley's purporting that this is on purpose in order to conceal some sort of secrets, which Levi had to keep because of the secret societies to which he was a member. The cipher manuscripts were alleged to date from the earliest years of the 19th century, and there is a note to one page which seems to be in the writing of Eliphas Levi. It appears extremely probable that he had access to this manuscript on his visit to Bulwer Lytton in England. In any case, as previously observed, Levi shows constantly that he knew the correct attributions, with the exception, of course, of Sadi. That's a Hebrew letter. Y will be seen later, and tried to use them without improperly revealing any secrets which he was sworn not to disclose. As soon as one possesses the true attributions of these trumps, the tarot leaps into life. One is intellectually knocked down by the rightness of it. All the difficulties created by the traditional attributions, as understood by the ordinary scholar, disappear in a flash. For this reason, one is inclined to credit the claim for the promulgators of the cipher manuscript, that they were guardians of a tradition of truth. 3. The Tarot and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Sorry if I'm just rolling through sections without too much commentary. I'm not really going to speak too much to what I just don't know about. But I think that was pretty interesting. I would like to read Eliphas Levi's book on tarot. That would be beneficial. 3. The Tarot and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. One must now digress into the history of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the society reconstituted by Dr. Westcott and his colleagues in order to show further evidence as to the authenticity of the claim of the promulgators of the cipher manuscript. Among these papers, besides the attribution of the tarot, were certain skeleton rituals which purported to contain the secrets of initiation. The name, with an address in Germany, of Fräulein Sprengel was mentioned as the issuing authority. Dr. Westcott wrote to her, and with her permission, the Order of the Golden Dawn was founded in 1886. Interesting. The Golden Dawn is merely a name for the outer or preliminary order of the RR at AC, which is in its turn an external manifestation of the AA, which is the true order of masters. And there's a note on that. He also says to see his book Magic, also known as, I think, Book 4, on these pages. The genius who made this possible was a man named Samuel Liddell Mathers. After a time, Fräulein Sprengel died. A letter written to her, asking for more advanced knowledge, elicited a reply from one of her colleagues. This letter informed Dr. Westcott of her death, adding that the writer and his associates had never approved of Fräulein Sprengel's action in authorizing any form of group working, but, in view of the great reverence and esteem in which she was held, had refrained from open opposition. He went on to say that this correspondence must now cease, but that if they wanted more advanced knowledge, they could perfectly well get it by using in the proper manner the knowledge which they had already possessed. Excuse me. In other words, they must utilize their magical powers to make contact with the secret chiefs of the order. This, incidentally, is a quite normal and traditional mode of procedure. So basically talking ethereally to some disembodied people in order to gain more information. Shortly afterwards, I think my camera died. Okay, camera died. Let's find our spot again. This, incidentally, is a quite normal and traditional mode of procedure. Shortly afterwards, Mathers, who had maneuvered himself into the practical headship of the order, announced that he had made this link, that the secret chiefs had authorized him to continue the work of the order as its sole head. There is, however, no evidence that he was here a witness of truth, because no new knowledge of any particular importance came to the order. Such as did appear proved to be no more than Mathers could have acquired by normal means from quite accessible sources, such as the British Museum. So here Crowley is kind of shitting on his old rival, Mr. Mathers, who became the head of the Golden Dawn, probably one of the reasons Crowley went off to form his own group. Sorry for the noise of my cat playing in the background, if you can hear that. These circumstances and a great deal of petty intrigue led to serious dissatisfaction among the members of the order. Fraulein Sprengel's judgment that group working in an order of this sort is possible was shown in this case to be wrong. In 1900, the order in its existing form was destroyed. The point of these data is simply to show that, at a time, the main preoccupation of all the serious members of the order was to get in touch with the secret chiefs themselves. In 1904, success was attained by one of the youngest members, Frater Perdurabo, that's Crowley himself. The very fullest details of this occurrence are given in the Equinox of the Gods. 1. It is not here useful to discuss the evidence which goes to establish the truth of this claim, but it is to be observed that it is internal evidence. It exists in the manuscript itself. It would make no difference if the statement of any persons concerned turned out to be false. There's a cat over there. Okay. 4. The nature of the evidence. These historical digressions have been essential to the understanding of the conditions of this inquiry. It is now proper to consider the peculiar, however that's pronounced, numbering, peculiar numbering of the trumps. It appears natural to a mathematician to begin the series of natural numbers with 0, but it is very disturbing to the non-mathematically trained mind. In the traditional essays and books on the tarot, the card numbered 0 was supposed to lie between the cards 20 and 21. The secret of the initiated interpretation, which makes the whole meaning of the trumps luminous, is simply to put this card marked 0 in its natural place, where any mathematician would have put it, in front of the number 1. But there is still one peculiarity, one disturbance in the natural sequence. This is that the cards 8 and 11 have to be counterchanged in order to preserve the attribution. For the card 11 is called strength. He calls it lust in his deck. On it appears a lion, and it quite evidently refers to the zodiacal sign Leo. That's arguable. Whereas the card 8 is called Justice and represents the conventional symbol figure throned with sword and balances, thus obviously referring to Tile's zodiacal sign, or the zodiacal sign of Libra, the balance. That might be kind of a surface way to observe it. One card has a lion, one card has scales, therefore one is Leo, one is Libra. I don't know if that's how we should be interpreting the cards, but go ahead, Crowley. Frater Perdurabo had made a very profound study of the tarot since his initiation to the order on 18th November 1898. For 3 months later, he had attained the grade of practicus. As such, he became entitled to know the secret attribution. He constantly studied this and the accompanying explanatory manuscripts. He checked up on all these attributes of the numbers to the forms of nature and found nothing incongruous. Okay, but when, 8th of April, 1904, he was writing down the Book of the Law from the dictation of the messenger of the secret chiefs, he seems to have put a mental question suggested by the words in chapter 1, verse 57, quote, "The law of the fortress and the great mystery of the house of God." The house of God is one name of the tarot trump numbered 16. To this effect, I have got these attributions right. For there came an interpolated answer. All these old letters of my book are aright, but Sadi is not the star. This also is secret. My prophet shall reveal it to the wise. This was exceedingly annoying. If Sadi was not the star, what was, and what was Sadi? He tried for years to counterchange this card, the star, which is numbered 17, with some other. He had no success. It was many years later that the solution came to him. Sadi is the emperor, and therefore the positions of 17 and 4 must be counterchanged. This attribution is very satisfactory. Yes, but it is something a great deal more than satisfactory. It is, to clear thought, the most convincing evidence possible that the Book of the Law is a genuine message from the secret chiefs. Interesting argument he makes here. So basically he's saying that in the Book of the Law, which he claims was dictated to him by a disembodied voice, it was told to him that the Hebrew letter Sadi is not associated with the tarot trump, the star, as it had been done traditionally by the Golden Dawn, I guess. And basically, in proving this, or in the clarity of this statement, is the proof that the Book of the Law is authentic. I'm kind of not assuming, but that's kind of how I'm wrapping up his argument here. Excuse me if that's too simple. 4. The star is referred to Aquarius in the zodiac, and the emperor to Aries. Now, Aries and Aquarius are on each side of Pisces, just as Leo and Libra are on each side of Virgo. That is to say, the correction in the Book of the Law gives a perfect symmetry in the zodiacal attribution, just as if a loop were formed at the end of the ellipse to correspond exactly with the existing loop at the other end. These matters sound rather technical. In fact, they are, but the more one studies the tarot, the more one perceives the admirable symmetry and perfection of the symbolism. Yet, even to the layman, it ought to be evident that balance and fitness are essential to any perfection. And the elucidation of these two tangles in the last 150 years is undoubtedly a very remarkable phenomenon. Where's my voice? Okay, so now we have a little summary. Summary of the questions hitherto discussed. 1. The origin of the tarot is quite irrelevant. Even if it were certain, it must stand or fall as a system on its own merits. 2. It is beyond doubt a deliberate attempt to represent in pictorial form the doctrines of the Kabbalah. 3. The evidence for this is very much like the evidence brought forward by a person doing a crossword puzzle. He knows from the across clues that his word is SCRUN blank H. So it is certain beyond error that the blank must be a C. In order to make the word scrunch, I guess he chose scrunch for some reason. I'll never figure that out. 4. These attributions are in one sense a conventional symbolic map. Such could be invented by some person or persons of great artistic imagination and ingenuity, combined almost unthinkably great scholarship and philosophical clarity. 5. Such persons, however eminent we may suppose them to have been, are not quite capable of making a system so abstruse in its entirety without the assistance of superiors, whose mental processes were or are pertaining to a higher dimension. Basically, you got to talk to some disembodied spirits in order to get some deep info, stuff you can't kind of obtain objectively on your own. So here we come across some diagrams, and I guess I should explain these a little deeper. We're going to go just a little bit further before I stop. Just want to see where we are. Page 12. One might take, by way of an analogy, the game of chess. Chess has developed from very simple beginnings. It was a mimic battle for tired warriors. but the subtleties of the modern game which we have now, thanks to Richard Reddy, gone quite beyond calculation into the world of aesthetic creation, were latent in the original design. The originators of the game were building better than they knew. It is of course possible to argue that these subtleties have arisen in the course of the development of the game, and indeed it is quite clear historically that the early players whose games are on record had no conscious conception of anything beyond a variety of rather crude or elementary stratagems. It is quite possible to argue that the game of chess is merely one of a number of games which has developed while other games died out because of some accident. One can argue that it is merely by chance that modern chess was latent in the original game. The theory of inspiration is really very much simpler, and it accounts for the facts without violation of the law of parsimony. Law of parsimony, not sure what that means. So let's go back a moment here. About 21 minutes. We might go a little longer. So first, we have the Unicursal Hexagram. It has always been declared impossible to draw a unicursal hexagram. Unicursal meaning drawn in one stroke. But this has now been accomplished. The lines, however, are strictly Euclidean. They have no breadth. So here he's drawn his famous symbol of the unicursal hexagram with a little flower in the middle. But basically it's a way to draw a six-pointed star without lifting your pen from the paper. Next to it we have the days of the week. Read around the hexagon, the magical order of the 7 sacred planets. Read along the hexagram, the order of the days of the week. It is believed that this neat discovery is due to the late G.H. Frater, DDCF. Okay, so what they're saying here is that read around the hexagon, which is the outer shape, you have the order of the 7 sacred planets. And you can see that here starting with the moon, or you can start on the other side with Saturn, but the moon to Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. So from closest, essentially, to furthest, you have your order going around the circle. Oh, let me show you my cursor. Here's the moon, and it goes around the hexagon to Saturn. Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. But then read along the hexagram, which is the star, the 7-pointed star inside, you get the order of the days of the week. So we can start with moon again, Monday, Mars for Tuesday, Mercury for Wednesday, Jupiter Thursday, Venus Friday, Saturn Saturday, Sun Sunday, and look, we come right back to the moon. So that's a really interesting pattern. You go around the outside of the shape, you get the order of the planets, you go inside along the lines of the star, and you find the order of the days of the week. Now here's what he was talking about, Crowley was talking about with the zodiacal signs being on a loop. So we associate some of the tarot trumps, those are the Roman numerals here, with zodiacal signs. So it starts here with Aries, which is the 4th card, the Emperor, in this association. And when it starts with Aries, what he's saying is it travels down this way to Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, up this way to Leo, and then it loops Virgo's in the loop, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, then down this way to Aquarius, Pisces is here in the loop, and back to Aries. So you can see there's this kind of looping infinity shape going on with the zodiacal signs. So that's the order of the signs, but as you can see, the Roman numerals go differently. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is here with Libra, not up here with Leo. And that's how he explains the interchanging of 11 and 8, but also the interchanging of 17 and 4, because 17 is at the end of the loop and 4 is equally away from the beginning. they're actually reflective of 11 and 8 on this side. So he claims that the switching of Sadi from this 17, Aquarius, the star, and attributing it to 4, Aries, the emperor, creates this symmetry in the loop, etc. And this is the proof that the Book of the Law is true. Here we go on to part 2, the Tarot and the Holy Kabbalah. And then we'll get to the Naples arrangement, read a little bit about that, and then I think that's where we're going to stop. So, the next issue is the Holy Kabbalah. This is a very simple subject and presents no difficulties to the ordinary, intelligent mind. There are 10 numbers in the decimal system, and there is a genuine reason why there should be 10 numbers, and only 10. In a numerical system, which is not merely mathematical but philosophical, it is necessary at this point to introduce the Naples arrangement. But first of all, one must understand the pictorial representation of the universe given by the Holy Kabbalah. See diagram. This picture represents the Tree of Life. I'm not sure exactly where the Tree of Life is. Let me just do a quick little search in the document, see if I can find it. I'm on page 10 here. Excuse me one moment. Okay, so I'm not seeing any diagrams with the Tree of Life. Let's keep going. We eventually get to diagrams of his cards. Let's go towards the end and see what we can find. Oh, okay, so here's a Tree of Life. So, let's see, do we see that okay? Right. So, just so you guys get, this might be a familiar image to you. This shows the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. It's kind of the series of emanation from the unmanifest into manifestation. So, manifestation occurs here at the bottom, in the 10th Sephiroth, known as Malkuth. Things begin, quote-unquote begin. There's no real beginning or end, obviously, which we discussed earlier in the text, but technically begin here at the top. And it comes down in a sort of lightning strike fashion. Anyway, this is how the Kabbalists organize creation, and basically all the building blocks or parts of the universe. Okay, now let's just jump right back up to where we were. So now that we have a little glance at the image, we can talk about it. This picture represents the Tree of Life, which is a map of the universe. One must begin, as a mathematician would, with the idea of zero, absolute zero, which turns out on examination to mean any quantity that one may choose, but not, as the layman may at first suppose, nothing. In the absence of anything, vulgar sense of the word. See Bereshith, Paris, 1902. That's another thing that he wrote. Here we go on to the Naples arrangement. Let me just expand this back up to where we had it a moment ago. The Kabbalists expanded this idea of nothing and got a second kind of nothing, which they called Ein Sof, without limit. This idea seems not unlike that of space. Then they decided that in order to interpret this mere absence of any means of definition, it was necessary to postulate the Ein Sof Or, the limitless light. By this, they seem to have meant very much what the late Victorian men of science meant, or thought that they meant, by the luminiferous ether, or the space-time continuum, asks Crowley. All this is evidently without form and void. These are abstract conditions, not positive ideas. The next step must be the idea of position. One must formulate this thesis. If there is anything except nothing, it must exist within this boundless, limitless light. within this space, within this inconceivable nothingness, or what I might call a field of ether, which cannot exist as nothingness, but has to be conceived of as a nothingness composed of the annihilation of two imaginary opposites. Thus appears the point, which has neither parts nor magnitude, but only position. But position does not mean anything at all unless there is something else, some other position, with which it can be compared. One has to describe it. The only way to do this is to have another point. That means that one must invent the number 2, making possible the line. But this line does not really mean very much, because there is yet no measure of length. The limit of knowledge at this stage is that there are 2 things, in order to be able to talk about them at all. But one cannot say that they are near each other or that they are far apart. One can only say that they are distant. In order to discriminate between them at all, there must be a third thing. We must have another point. One must invent the surface, or a third. One must invent the triangle. In doing this, incidentally, appears the whole of plane geometry. One can now say A is nearer to B than A is to C. But, there's always a but. So far, there is no subscience in any of these ideas. In fact, there are no ideas at all, except the idea of distance and perhaps the idea of betweenness and of angular measurement. So that plane geometry, which now exists in theory, is after all completely inchoate, and incoherent. There has been no approach at all to the conception of a really existing thing. No more has been done than to make definitions all in a purely ideal and imaginary world. Now then comes the abyss from imaginary into actual. One cannot go any further into the ideal. The next step must be the actual. Hey, I just said that. At least an approach to the actual. There are 3 points, but there is no idea of where any one of them is. A 4th point is now essential, and this formulates the idea of matter. The point, the line, the plane. The 4th point, unless it should happen to lie in the plane, gives the solid. If one wants to know the position of any point, one must define it by the use of the 3 coordinate axes. So we need 4. It is so many feet from the north wall, and so many feet from the east wall, and so many feet from the floor. Thus there has been developed from nothingness a something which can be said to exist. One point has arrived at the idea of matter. Or one has arrived at the idea of matter. Material something. But this existence is exceedingly tenuous, for the only property of any given point is its position in relation to certain other points. No change is possible. Nothing can happen. One is therefore compelled in the analysis of known reality to postulate a 5th positive idea, which is that of motion. Matter has to move in order for existence to exist, life to be, because we know motion is happening. This implies the idea of time, for only through motion and in time can any event happen. Without this change and sequence, nothing can be the object of sense. It is to be noticed that this number 5 is the number of the letter He, or He, in the Hebrew alphabet. This is the letter traditionally consecrated to the Great Mother. It is the womb in which the Great Father, who is represented by the letter Yod, which is pictorially the representation of the ultimate point, moves and begets active existence. There is now possible a concrete idea of the point, and at last it is a point which can be self-conscious, because it can have a past, present, and future. Time is now available. It is able to define itself in terms of the previous ideas. Here is the number 6 at the center of the system, self-conscious, capable of experience. At this stage, it is convenient to turn away for a moment from the strictly Kabbalistic symbolism. The doctrine of the next 3 numbers, to some minds at least, is not very clearly expressed. One must look to the Vedanta system for a more lucid interpretation of the numbers 7, 8, and 9, although they correspond very closely with the Kabbalistic ideas. In the Hindu analysis of existence, the rishis, or sages, postulate 3 qualities. Sat, the essence of being itself. Chit, or thought, or intellection, and Ananda, usually translated as bliss, the pleasure experienced by being in the course of events. This ecstasy is evidently the exciting cause of the mobility of existence. It explains the assumption of imperfection on the part of perfection. The absolute would be nothing, would remain in the condition of nothingness. Therefore, in order to be conscious of its possibilities and to enjoy them, or to just live, it must explore these possibilities. One may here insert a parallel statement of this doctrine from the document called the Book of the Great Auk, to enable the student to consider the position from the standpoint of 2 different minds. Here we go. All elements must at one time have been separate. That would be the case with great heat. Now, when the atoms get to the sun, we get that immense extreme heat, and all the elements are themselves again. Imagine that each atom of each element possesses the memory of all his adventures in combination. By the way, that atom, fortified with memory, cannot be the same atom. Yet it is, because it has gained nothing from anywhere except this memory. Therefore, by the lapse of time, and by virtue of memory, a thing could become something more than itself. Thus, a real development is possible. One can then see a reason for any element deciding to go through this series of incarnations, because so, and only so, he can go. Or can he go? And he suffers the lapse of memory which he has during these incarnations, because he knows he will come through unchanged. Therefore, you can have an infinite number of gods, individual and equal, though diverse, each one supreme and utterly indestructible. This is also the only explanation of how a being could create a world in which war, evil, etc. exist. Evil is only an appearance because, like good, it cannot affect the substance itself, but only multiply its combinations. This is something the same as mystic monotheism, but the objection to that theory is that God has to create things which are all parts of himself, so that their interplay is false. If we presuppose many elements, their interplay is natural. That's something I'm going to have to go back and read to really get a full comprehension of. These ideas of being, thought, and bliss constitute the minimum possible qualities which a point must possess if it is to have a real sensible experience of itself. These correspond to the numbers 9, 8, and 7. The first idea of reality, as known by the mind, is therefore to conceive of the point as built up of these previous 9 successive developments from 0. Here then, at last, is the number 10, full realization. And just to summarize that a little bit, the last 3 steps before 10, 7, 8, and 9 are these ideas of being, thought, and bliss. In what order, I couldn't really tell you. 9 being being, 8 being thought, 7 being bliss. In other words, to describe reality in the form of knowledge, one must postulate these 10 successive ideas. In the Kabbalah, they are called Sephiroth, which mean numbers. As will be seen later, each number has a significance of its own. Each corresponds with all phenomena in such a way that their arrangement in the tree of life, as shown in the diagrams on the pages 266, 68, and 70, is a map of the universe. These 10 numbers are represented in the tarot by the 40 small cards. So each of the 4 suits has 10 small cards. And he's saying that the 10 numbers in the suits are representative of the 10 Sephiroth on the tree. Just to give a little summary, and I believe he actually does this summary later on in the book, kind of explaining what he just said in this Naples arrangement. But essentially, you start with this kind of limitless light, which is kind of the negative expression of everything. What there is before positive manifestation. But if anything is to be, there needs to be some sort of positive manifestation, which begins simply as just a 1. And then he explains how that 1 has to develop itself all the way up to 10 in order to be a living thing, in order to experience the life, essentially. So 1 being the point, 2 being the second point to which it can relate, third point creating space, essentially, 4th creating matter, 5th motion, 6th consciousness, 7 I think we said was bliss, 8, sorry, I'm sort of skipping around here, matter time, right. 7 bliss, 8 thought, 9 being, and 10 sort of the ultimate culmination, just material existence, what we kind of colloquially call life, experience, etc. So it is a kind of a container of all those other numbers, which in combination create the full experience of life. Good. So the next section would be the tarot and the formula of the Tetragrammaton. That's where I'm going to start off in the next video, part 3. Thanks for watching.